This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Spring calls for a wardrobe refresh, and Nordstrom has the best styles of the season. From dresses and denim to standout tops and accessories, find the trends and essentials that feel right for you. Discover new arrivals from brands you love like Wave, Princess Polly, Mango, Adidas, and Free People. Plus, free shipping and returns and free styling appointments make everything so easy. Shop in stores at Nordstrom.com or download the Nordstrom app.
Corals are a very slow-growing species. We probably wouldn't see an actual idea of what a successful translocation would be for 10, 20, 30 years. And of course, at that point, the damage of this development will already have been seen.
Bryan Wilson, thank you so much for speaking to me. You are a coral biologist. You have been looking at the impact of human activities on coral reefs. As you may be aware, there's a transshipment terminal and a huge township that is being planned in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. To be precise, the Great Nicobar Islands. The Zoological Survey of India has said in court that the transshipment terminal which is being built will not impact the corals, but if they do, they are suggesting that nearly 16,050 corals will be translocated. And what they've also said is that there are nearly 300 species of corals which belong to nearly 66 genera, and that the survival rate is more than 90%. Your comments?
Wow. I mean, where do I start? Okay, first and foremost, as you know, coral reefs around the world are suffering massively at the expense of global climate change at the moment, and we are losing vast tranches and waves of reefs all over the world. And you may have recently seen reports that we are set to potentially lose all coral reefs within this century. So the idea that we would actually go into an environment where there are coral reefs that may or may not be existing healthily and then uproot those reefs. And in fact, I should probably step back there. From what you've said, it's not the reefs that they're planning on translocating, it's the corals. And the corals are just one aspect. Now, corals, of course, produce essentially the 3D structure of a reef, the buildings which in the inhabitants of a reef will kind of live and survive and feed and breed and all of these things. But
you said this place was steps from the water.
We just haven't found the steps yet.
How much did we save?
Enough.
Enough to get lost?
Or you could book a stay with Hilton.
Welcome to your oceanfront room, just steps from the water.
The Hilton sale is on now. Book on Hilton.com or the Hilton app and save up to 20% to get the stay you expected. When you want savings, not surprises, it matters where you stay. Hilton, for the stay.
To lift just one aspect of this reef structure, this incredibly complex reef structure, and move it and suggest that environment will be exactly the same as it was originally is well, scientifically, I would say it's madness, absolute madness. One of the things that got me into coral reefs in the early days was my first diving on these and just being utterly bewildered by the chaos, the beautiful abstract chaos of a coral reef. And the idea that as human beings, and something I've spent the last 20 years trying to get my head around, is that we can try and understand the complexity of this amazing, environmental and ecological system is, I mean, still to me I feel like I could spend the rest of my life and I would only understand maybe one small aspect, which in my case would be these very beautiful, basic and very old organisms, the corals.
You described it well, but here's what was said in court, which was that the Zoological Survey of India has also given examples of similar coral translocations, which were done in the Gulf of Kutch, which is on the western coast of India. And they say they have the necessary experience to make this happen, that the corals will be fine once they're just translocated from point A to point B. In your experience, internationally, what are the survival rates for coral translocations?
So I did dig out actually in anticipation of this call that ZSI study, or that which was done in was it Gujarat back in 24. I have to be honest, I haven't found any data showing how successful that translocation was. I also note that was also 16,000 corals, and I don't know if this is just an arbitrary value that has been brought up to translate a reef system. Now, one of the difficulties with coral reefs and corals, full stop, is that, as you pointed out, there are around about 300 species, I think, located in that region, which would make sense to me as it's close to the coral triangle.
Ready to soundtrack your summer? With Red Bull Summer All Day Play, you choose a playlist that fits your summer vibe the best. Are you a festival fanatic, a deep end DJ, a road dog, or a trail mixer? Just add a song to your chosen playlist and put your summer on track. Red Bull Summer All Day Play. Red Bull gives you wings. Visit redbull.com/brightsummer to learn more. See you this summer.
And it's on the upper end of biodiversity in terms of marine ecosystems. Now, there are some species that do transplant very well, and these are typically ones of the Acropora species, which are, they're a fairly resilient species, and in some cases refer to them as a weedy species. They do very well. But coral reefs are not just one genera. They are, as you said, in this particular region, maybe upwards of 50 or 60 genera, and these all cope very, very differently with environmental disturbance and such things as translocation. So whilst some corals might indeed survive that translocation, it would not be an entire reef system. What you can imagine is that, and I've seen this in otherwise successful, and I use air quotes there, translocation projects or restoration projects around the world where they've claimed that they've reproduced an entire coral reef. I mean, nothing of the sort. They've achieved success with a subsection, a fraction of that original natural coral reef system. And certainly when I look at the reports on that translocation in Gujarat back in, I think, 21,
Yes.
It mentions the Acropora, the branching Acropora, and also some of the massive corals like the Parietes. Yes. Again, very sturdy, very resilient species, but by no means a reflection of the beauty of a natural coral reef.
If there are examples from other parts of the world, what does the science say? What has been the experience? Has it been documented anywhere that 50% would have survived? I'm sure there are other translocation projects across the world.
I think, the go-to figure on survival rates of this kind of thing, and it's not something that's entirely within my subject area in terms of the fact that my passion is preserving, natural wild ecosystems and not disturbing them in any way, shape, or form. I think the figure for success rates would be closer to 60 or 70%. So I think when I've read these figures that have been bandied around by ZSI of close to 100% survival rate, I'd be very, very, very dubious indeed about these cleans actually being reached. And one of the things that we have to recognize as well is that corals are very slow growing species. And we probably wouldn't see an actual idea of what a successful translocation would be for 10, 20, 30 years. And of course, at that point, the damage of this development will already have been seen.
Right. And what are the murmurs you're hearing from Indian scientists? You don't have to reveal names, but what are they saying to you? Do they agree with the ZSI version, which has been presented in court? Because really, it's on the basis of that evidence which was given in court that the project was cleared. But offline, what are you hearing?
I mean, I have to be very careful here, as you imagine. These are wonderful, beautiful, passionate friends of mine that are generally very, very worried about, of course, being involved or being mentioned for fear of the fact that their careers will be stalled or stymied. But the overriding sense I'm getting from them is that, they have no idea. They haven't been able to dive in the Nicobar reefs, so they've got no idea what those coral reefs look like. Only recently, in 23-24, we had an El Nino that swept through the Indian Ocean region. It's something I've been, very passionate about investigating myself in the Chagos Archipelago, and certainly we have seen the reefs impacted there. So my colleagues have no real idea what those reefs look like, and certainly in some of the articles I've read, I see that some of the coral use maps have changed for around about Galathea Bay, which again just seems very untoward, and And so the big issue that I think as a scientist and as a researcher that I'm really concerned about is that there has been no independent fact checking of what ZSI says is the status of those reefs. And if this is a fully transparent development, then of course you would allow other scientists outside of the government to survey those. I, of course, would love the opportunity to dive on those reefs, and it's something, I may never, of course, get the chance to do after this interview.
That's a point to ponder. And I don't know, maybe if someone in the government is listening to your interview, I hope they'll invite you to come and dive over there. And perhaps you could give us the scientific evidence, which, they're saying there will be a high survival rate. Here's my next question to you, which is that when you hear that there is the archipelago of Andaman and Nicobar, and you know how pristine this part of the world is, and then you hear this mega project which will come up. I am told that there will be 20,000 people. It'll be a massive township. What comes to your mind as a coral biologist?
I mean, I have to hold my head in my hands. Even in my very short time as a coral biologist this last decade or two, I've seen changes to these reefs that are beyond what I would expect to happen within my lifetime. And of course, this has now come to the forefront of the media, and we've seen recently, the Blue Planet effect through those wonderful documentaries from the BBC that have highlighted how our oceans are changing. And for a government of any kind to go to somewhere and I daren't use the word pristine because I worry that we don't actually have pristine environments left on this planet. But what we would say would be near pristine. And certainly from talking with colleagues in India, I mean, the Nicobars and the Andamans are up there. They are meant to be as beautiful as the Chagos archipelago itself. And so for me, I'm full of hope that we still have areas that are still this beautiful left in the world. And everything in my power that I can use to draw attention to these areas and protect them for future generations is essentially, I mean, that feels like a kind of a life goal to have now. So of course, when I was first alerted to this project several years back when I was visiting colleagues in India, I again, it baffles me. It baffles me that given everything that's going on around the world at the moment, we are the first generation of human society to truly know the damages we are visiting upon the environment, and to also know that it's within our power to stop this happening. And the fact, I suppose, that ZSI has ticked this and said that everything's going to be okay. To me, it seems like greenwashing of the highest order.
Developments on land will also affect the diversity, the marine diversities, perhaps all the construction and the pollution which will spill into the waters there.
On top of global climate change and acidification of the oceans, which are very much, I suppose, indirect stresses and impacts of human activity on this planet, we also have very direct local impacts. And these are things like coastal development, overfishing, agricultural runoff, and these near pristine islands, these rainforests, essentially, which are so tightly bound to the reefs and the surrounding oceans. I think if you develop these coastlines, it's going to have a catastrophic impact on the reefs around these islands. And I think of places like the beaches where, of course, leatherback turtles are found to nest, and the seagrass meadows that these turtles depend upon. These will all be irreversibly impacted by a development of this scale on this coastline.
Bryan Wilson, thank you so much for speaking to me. As a parting thought, if you could just leave my viewers or the people who may read this story a plea for corals. Why do we need to save them? Why does it matter? Isn't this, we've been told in India that this terminal is of great importance. What would you say to them? Just something on behalf of the corals.
Well, so, chatting with colleagues of mine in India, around the mainland doesn't have great coral reefs, but what it does have is these islands like the Lakshadweeps, like the Nicobars and the Andamans, that are true areas of unique biodiversity and something that all Indian people should be proud of. And allowing this absolute tragedy, not just to the environment, but also to the human peoples on Great Nicobar as well is a blight on the government and on the generation that allows this to happen. Very strong words, I realize, but yeah, this is something that inflames a passion in me that won't be quenched.
Bryan Wilson, thank you so much for speaking to me.
The right window treatments change everything: your sleep, your privacy, the way every room looks and feels. At Blinds.com, we've spent 30 years making it surprisingly simple to get exactly what your home needs. We've covered over 25 million windows and have 50,000 five-star reviews to prove we deliver. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we have you covered. Real design professionals, free samples, zero pressure. Right now, get up to 50% off with minimum purchase, plus get a free professional measure at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.